Let's pick up the story here. Joining us is the reporter who received that press release from the cancer patient from King 5 TV in Seattle, Chris Daniels. Chris, so you get this kind of release on your day. It's obviously a slow news day, not that this is not an incredibly compelling story, and you sprint into action.
Yeah, I mean, we hear about these kind of stories, as you said, millions of stories like this across the country, and we hear about our fair share here in Seattle. And like you said, it was a slow news day, and we picked up that press release, and the editors here said, Chris, why don't you make a couple of calls on this? And so I called Eric myself, and he told me his story, and I said, okay, let's go down the next channel. We contacted the hospital to try and get into Eric's hospital room there, and the hospital at first said, no, we can't let you come in here. Eric is far too sick to talk about this and spend this amount of energy on it. So I called Eric back, and he said, I tell you what, I'll wheel myself out of the hospital if I need to tell this story. And so we met him outside the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, and you see those first pictures of Eric when he actually gets wheeled out. And you can tell this is a man who perhaps only had days to live, and he was so excited to actually have somebody who would listen to his story. And I remember vividly him holding this large booklet of notes that he had gathered and credit card receipts and said, look at all this that I've done. Nobody will listen to me. And he broke down in tears at one point, saying, why won't anybody help me? Look at all this work that I've done. And that's where we picked it up and ran with it, because I was personally compelled by his story.
This is a very compelling man.
To see the strain that this was putting on.
All right, Chris and Josh will be back after the break with a surprise twist of this story that's life and death. You will not believe what's coming up and who committed the crime. Don't go anywhere. We're back with our special edition of The Big Idea America Investigates, and the frightening truth that almost anyone, even if you're on your deathbed, can be the victim of an identity thief. With us, Seattle reporter Chris Daniels from King 5 TV. He helped investigate the alarming story of a cancer patient fighting for his life who had his identity stolen while he was in the hospital. Someone was racking up credit card bills using his name. Correspondent Josh Mankiewicz presented an investigation on NBC Dateline. Josh, pick up the story as a very, very brave man is fighting for his life at this point.
Well, you know, Eric was one of these guys who just wouldn't take no for an answer. His family, his doctors, just about everybody was saying to him, you need to get better. You need to not be wasting your time and possibly killing yourself trying to investigate this identity theft that happened against you. But Eric would simply not take no for an answer, and he basically did the job of the police for them.
I was able to go down the list, called every single store that was on this list and said, hey, here's the deal. Told him Eric's story. What I'm looking for is some surveillance video.
They needed just one piece of tape, and Lowe's Hardware had it. But there was a catch. Lowe's said they could only give the tape to law enforcement. So reporter Daniels called the Seattle police, the same cops who originally had told Eric his case was apparently too small.
I said, hey, I tell you what, I've got 3 purchases that I know about. I'll tell you when these purchases were made. I want the video. We'll put it on the air and see where it goes.
That sounds to me like you doing the police's job for them.
I don't want to say that, but there was a lot of work done.
With a TV station on the other end of the phone, this time the Seattle PD agreed to help. The next day, Chris Daniels put that video on the air.
Tonight, a big break in his case. Seattle police believe they have surveillance video of the ID thief.
February 26, 2004, the real Eric Drew and all of Seattle got a glimpse of the man playing the part of Eric Drew in this Lowe's Hardware security video. Look under that winter coat. You'll see an important clue. The fake Eric Drew is wearing hospital scrubs. Did you recognize that person?
No, I did not.
Eric didn't recognize the man.
No.
And you didn't recognize him?
No.
But it wasn't long before people called in.
People said, I think I know who that guy is, and I think he works at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance.
The very same hospital where Eric Drew was receiving his treatments and struggling to stay alive. How long before you had a name?
Less than 24 hours.
And the name was?
Richard Gibson.
Richard Gibson, a 42-year-old father of 3. He's a lab technician who tested Eric's blood at the hospital.
To pick on somebody, knowingly pick on somebody who is so ill and in such a dire situation, you can't have a soul, you can't have a heart.
Mr. Gibson, how long have you been doing this? No comment.
Richard Gibson turned himself in to the Seattle police on March 2nd, 2004.
Anything you want to say to Eric Drew?
No comments, Seth. Thanks a lot.
Eric was still quite ill, and just getting the bad news that the treatment that had brought him to Seattle in the first place hadn't worked at all. FBI agent James Rogers, who eventually handled Eric's case, says hospital patients are very vulnerable to this type of crime, but that this case was particularly outrageous. When most people check into a hospital, they usually have bigger concerns on their mind than their credit or protecting their privacy.
Oh, that's correct. I wasn't surprised that had happened in the hospital. I was just more, I guess, irritated by the fact that somebody was picking on a poor cancer patient that's fighting for his life.
Eric had hoped to be in court on the day of sentencing. He wanted to tell the judge his side of the story, but he was too sick to get there and had to tell it on videotape.
I appreciate this opportunity to share with you all of my terrible experience with identity theft.
By then, Eric was in Minneapolis at yet another hospital fighting not crime, but once again leukemia. In Minneapolis, Eric underwent yet another experimental treatment using umbilical cord blood, a procedure which had only been tried on about 600 adult leukemia patients. It was his last hope.